Several Wednesday nights, and we're going to look at the book of Ecclesiastes, and we're going to title this "The Pursuit, Chasing, Meaning Under the Sun." And the book of Ecclesiastes is very interesting. We look here at the date of the writing. Solomon's reign as king of Israel lasted from around 970 BC to around 930 BC. And the book of Ecclesiastes was likely written towards the end of his reign. Many think this was approximately 935 BC. Now, the purpose of the writing. Why was the book of Ecclesiastes written? Well, Ecclesiastes is a book of perspective when you look at it. The narrator of the preacher reveals the depression that inevitably results from seeking happiness in worldly things. This gives Christians an opportunity to see the world through the eyes of a person who, though very wise, is trying to find meaning in temporary human things. And most every form of worldly pleasure is explored by the preacher, and none of it gives him a sense of meaning. Very interesting in this book that we look at. Many believe, and we'll get into this here in just a moment, trying not to get ahead of myself, that Solomon, who I believe is the writer of this book, is writing this at the end of his life and as he looks back. So here's a question. You may have thought, what in the world is this word here? Who is Qoheleth in Ecclesiastes? Now, as you can see there, that's a Hebrew word, Qoheleth, a Hebrew word that means preacher, teacher, or a collective of sayings. And it appears in the very first verse of the book of Ecclesiastes. And in fact, the literal Hebrew title of this book is the words of Qoheleth, the son of David, and the king in Jerusalem, which is often sorted to simplify Qoheleth. The preacher or teacher is also mentioned in Ecclesiastes 1, verse 12, and then chapter 7, verse 27, and 12, verses 8 through 11. Let's go ahead and read these first three verses here, and then we'll continue on. We'll talk about the author here and why we believe that Solomon is the writer. It says, the words of the preacher. There we go, that word Qoheleth, that's Hebrew. The son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit hath a man of all his labor, which he taketh under the sun? Now, the book of Ecclesiastes does not give specific information about who this Qoheleth is, but there are, however, some evidence from the text of Ecclesiastes as well from the rest of the Bible that leads most scholars to believe that Solomon is the preacher and he's also the author, and this is also what I believe as well. Now, one reason the Qoheleth is identified as Solomon. Remember that word, I'll use that a couple times here, that's Hebrew. As identified as Solomon is that at one time Solomon was the what? He was the king of Israel. So there's an identifier that already is there right off the mark. And Ecclesiastes 1:1 identifies the preacher as king in Jerusalem. So there's an identifier. Now also in agreement with Ecclesiastes 1:1 was Solomon was son of David. Now, while the term son of can sometimes refer to a descendant or someone that's other than a son, Solomon was actually the direct son of David. And so the first verse of Ecclesiastes applies to him more literally than it would to almost any other person. So there is a significant identifier that Solomon is the author of this book. Most of the information useful in identifying the Qoheleth of Ecclesiastes comes from the end of the book. Ecclesiastes 12:9 says that Koheleth pondered and searched out and set in many other proverbs. So, this corresponds to the Bible's descriptions of Solomon as a writer of Proverbs. So, that's another identifier. Also, the description of the Koheleth as wise also matches other passages regarding Solomon as being a wise individual as well. So here is important things that attach him and show that he is the actual writer. Now, Ecclesiastes 12:9 also describes the Koheleth as imparting knowledge to people. This harmonizes with the biblical view also of Solomon. Solomon was a very wise individual. He was very intelligent. And this further makes the point, and we'll find this out if we get to this here in a little bit, of Ecclesiastes 1:16 through 17. Now, the general content of Ecclesiastes also connects with the idea of Solomon being the Koheleth. Solomon was blessed with profound wisdom, like we mentioned, profound wisdom, wealth, and power. And the writer of Ecclesiastes certainly experienced wealth and power in his reign. He had all these different things. Unfortunately, it seems that for a period of time in Solomon's life, Solomon chose to use his wisdom in a less than God-honoring way. And we see this often through the biblical text. He married an outrageous number of women, had a lot of concubines in addition to those, and interestingly, virtually every other king of Israel is associated with some prophet, but not Solomon. So this is what leads to some people that think that he isn't. There's just some things here that will be different. Even these facts dovetail with the idea that Solomon is the Koheleth of Ecclesiastes, a book written by a man who had tried everything under the sun and found it all to be vanity. And I think that is a perfect picture of Solomon because he tried it all. He tried to do everything to find that joy under the sun. And this was a description of him and a story of what he experienced. But this certainly agrees with the biblical depiction of Solomon, at least in terms of his wisdom, wealth, and spiritual knowledge. Now, all of this, there seems to be no solid evidence against Solomon's identity as the Koheleth, the preacher, and a fair amount of circumstantial evidence supporting it. And so this means, and I know this is a lot to talk about the author, but this solidifies for us that he was the writer who penned these words that we have today as the book of Ecclesiastes. Now let's look at some key words here. Key words in the book of Ecclesiastes is vanity. Occurs 37 times, the word vanity. So that's an important thing here. Key verse, chapter 1, verse number 2. Vanity here speaks of emptiness. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. So emptiness, worthlessness, and futility, this is what he's speaking of here, is vanity is what you have left after you knock off the rim of a zero. Is literally what he is talking about here. It is emptiness, nothingness, nothing to benefit anyone. Also vanity. Proverbs 31, verse number 30, does this. I don't know if we have that verse up or not. Let me read it here. I think it's on right here. Favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Now, what is being talked about here is that a table or counter with a mirror where a woman puts on her makeup to make her appear more beautiful than she really is. This is what the description literally is talking about here. And it's vanity. And he's talking about that vanity is emptiness. So what is the theme? What is being spoken of here was the vanity of life under the sun. That last verse there, verse number 3, his labor which he taketh under the sun, which occurs 29 times that we see within this text. Solomon's perspective is one that is strictly horizontal. It is sensual, limited to the five senses, and it defines the outlook of Solomon as he looks at life from a humanistic and a secular type of perspective, not from heaven's point of view. This is what we see here from him. So Solomon is the preacher that we see. The word preacher occurs 7 times in this book. We see it in chapter 1, verse 1 through 2, verse 12, chapter 7, verse 27, chapter 12, verses 8 through 10. And this is, the title of the sermon could be this, Vanity Fair. Almost think of like a tabloid magazine, like the Vanity. But this is what it could be described of. The sermon could be Vanity Fair. And this message contains organized points that he points out as he begins to talk about the vanity and the things under the sun for a specific purpose of bringing the listener to a decision. So 7 different vanities in Ecclesiastes as we do this introduction, and we're going to touch on these as we go through this entire book. Is first of all is labor without purpose. That'll be one that we're going to be covering. Wisdom and knowledge without purpose. And he's going to talk about how both the wise and the fool end up the same. Pleasure and fun. King Solomon was the perfect philosopher who analyzed life from the perspective of wine, women, wealth, and world. The 4 W's. That's what his perspective was. Number 4, we're going to look at materialism. 5 is egotism and pragmatism. The highest good is to eat, drink, and enjoy your work, since that is what I do. Egotism is this: my standard is the best one. That is what egotism is. Pragmatism is this: it works for me, therefore it should work for everyone else. It's like if everything fits inside of my little square, my little circle, everybody else's should the same exact way. So we're going to see that in another part of it. Also, success. We'll look at how he goes about talking about that. Success apart from God brings envy, not joy. We're going to find that out. Getting more and satisfied less. Satisfaction in life can never be attained in this manner. Now, there's a lot of people out there that find success in the world, but a success apart from God does not bring joy. It just brings envy. And that's what we find from Solomon as he talks about it. He talks about vanity of vanities. Solomon, I think if he would have lived during the 1960s, I saw someone and I thought this would be neat to put this. If Solomon lived in the 1960s, his favorite song would have been from the Rolling Stones, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. I think that would have been his song. And then number 7, we're going to look at mortality. And his conclusion invites the listener to fulfill the proper duty of life. See, life is not in vain if it is lived according to the will of God. We all know that. It's not something that's lived that's wasteful. If you live according to what God is telling you to do, it's not in vain. Under the sun, man is never wealthy enough. Women are never beautiful enough. Clothes are never fashionable enough. Cars are never fancy enough. Gadgets do not never-ending upgrades. Houses are never furnished enough. Food is never tasty enough. Relationships are never romantic enough. And life is never full enough under the sun. And these are things that Solomon discovered when he searched and when he looked. And this is what this book talks about. But it is only when we see life in relation to what is above the sun that all things begin to make sense. Not under the sun, but above the sun. So that's important. So that's a little bit of an introduction there, and that tells you about the theme. It talks you about the author. So let's move on, and we're going to read the remaining part of this chapter here, and we're going to look at the vicious cycle. That'll be the part that we're going to tackle here this evening. So starting in verse number 4, let's read through verse 18. One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full unto the place from whence the rivers come. Thither they return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, See, this is new? It hath been already of old time which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. And I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore trivial hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. I communed with mine own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to a great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this is also vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. One of the issues that the preacher seeks to expound on is the meaning of life. That is what Solomon is seeking to sort out, and we see this here in verse number 13. He's looking from an empirical, existential point of view. Solomon's qualifications to preach on this subject, he had been out, he had tried everything. And if there's anyone that could have spoken on this, it was him. As king, he was unlimited in what he could do. He had everything that he could imagine at his disposal. He gave himself over, stopped at nothing, and he had it. He had all that he could imagine. Well, first of all, there's four things that we need to see during his reign that he had. First of all, he was powerful. Israel, at the time of his reign, was at the zenith of her power. The strongest. It was at a very strong moment in the history of the Israelite people. She was the most powerful kingdom on earth, and Jerusalem was the most magnificent city, and temple was the most beautiful at its time. And we know this from 1 Kings chapter number 10. But also, it was prosperous during this period of time. David, his father, had left him a large and wealthy estate. Now, don't you wish that your grandparents just leave you a large amount of money and say, like, here it is, there you go. But David left him a large and wealthy estate. Many believe, according to 1 Chronicles 29, verses 3 through 4, that it may have been approximately equivalent to $90 million. Let me say that again. $90 million for the building of the temple. Now that was a significant amount of money. And for us today, I mean, I can't even fathom having $1 million. I mean, that is a lot of money. And so the annual income reached over $100 million. And also, according to 1 Kings chapter 4, he had quite the dinner table. And what does this mean? He didn't have just a little old meal. He had the best. He had the best food that you could imagine. But also of popularity, famous. Solomon was a popular, famous individual during this time. So there's a lot of things that were going for him during his reign. But another significant part of Solomon's reign was that there were no wars throughout Solomon's reign. No wars. This is according to 1 Kings 4:25. And therefore, a reason why he could collect a lot of funds, not having to spend it on warfare, it saved him. And he was able to benefit from that by having all this money. So Solomon used all these resources in pursuit of earthly fulfillment. And it begins this sermon dealing with the monotony of life. Repetition of the same string of activities amounting to drudgery and boredom. We see this in his description. No one can alter the routine of sameness of the ways of the world apart from God. And we see this in the story of Solomon here, what he's talking about. If it is under the circle, or if it's under the sun, it will run in circles. So let's see here, first of all, the cycle of labor. Let's look at back at verse number 3. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? You know, when you think about it, work is never done. I heard one guy who had a little plaque made. He said that he went and dusted for his wife. And as he dusted, he said the dust came back, and he wrote a plaque that said, I dusted you once, you came back. You're not going to fool me again. But work is never done. Dishes, they're always got to be done. Mowing the lawn, you've always got to mow the lawn. Washing the clothes, fixing the car, balancing books. If you work every April, it's time to do taxes. We know taxes are always going to be there. Vacuuming the carpet, cleaning the windows, clutter on a desk or a part in your house. There's always something to be done. See, work is never done. And when labor is limited to a profit, loss means to fulfill one's lust to eat, drink, and be merry, then there is no ultimate profit. And what does this mean? The person loses in the end. Labor is not an end, but a means to an end. Okay? So for laboring to be fulfilling, it should be a means to support family. God's work and helping others, its perspective. But not only do we see the cycle of labor, we see the cycle of nature. Let's look at verses 4 through 7 again. One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. He whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full unto the place from whence the rivers come. Thither they return again. What is he saying here is that everything is passing. Nothing is permanent except the endless loop of predictability. That's what he's saying. He starts out here talking about the endless generations. What does this say? Is that people come and go. And the world keeps dragging on. This is what he speaks about here in verse number 4. There is one mass of people who died today. There's people all around the world that died today. But also, there's another group that was born today. So what he's saying here is that it goes on. It just keeps going here. One person said there's equivalent around the world of 20,000 births in one day, an average. It's a lot of births. 1 John 2:17 tells us, And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof, but he that doth the will of God abideth forever. Now, this word here, forever, what does that mean to you, that word forever? Well, forever sometimes refers to the context of what a natural person can see under the sun. For an example, I will love you forever. That is something that we could possibly say. Also, Exodus 21:6 says, Then his master shall bring him unto the judges, And he shall also bring him to the door, or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him for, now separate there, ever. This refers to as long as you're alive on planet Earth. That's the reference that's there. But then we see here not only endless generations, but also time rushes on. This word here in verse number 5, the sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. Psalm 19, verses 4 through 5 refers to the sun as a strong man running a race. And time really begins to accelerate after you get saved, or oftentimes as now I have kids of my own. It seems like I was talking to Kendra yesterday, and we started working, and I said, man, this day just seems to just blow by. Before I know it, it's been lunch, and then it's supper, and when you're doing stuff with the kids, it just flies by because there's so many things that you're involved with. And we see this here because the wind keeps blowing the same way it always has. This is verse number 6. It says, the wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. Trade winds, prevailing water lies, Easter lilies, life is restless like the wind. This is what he's talking about. The waters keep moving. Verse number 7. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. Condensation and evaporation. It's said that 286,000 cubic miles of water flow into the sea every year. So it's a continual thing that we see here. But not only that, he goes into the cycle of discontent. Let's look at this in verses 8 through 11. All things are full of labor, man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything thereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be in remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. What is he saying here? Well, verse number 8, he's talking about no answers. Everything keeps on working, yet humans cannot really explain it. People keep searching for answers. And guess what they find when they search for answers? They have more questions. Just when I think I found the answer, someone else changes the question on me. Curiosity is aroused and then frustrated. There's a lot of things that I would like to have answers for, but in this life we may never know. And so, also we can never see enough. That's what he's talking about here in verse number 8. The eye is not satisfied. I think that kind of explains like we like to watch TV a lot. We're just never satisfied, right? The eye is not content to see. It must experience. But also the ear is not satisfied to hear. It must experience. And then he goes in here to verses 9 through 10. He talks about no change. If you want to know what is coming in the future, if what's happening in the past, if you have a Bible, there's a record of the past. If we want to know what's coming ahead, we have prophecy we've been foretold. We went through that and we talked through the book of Revelation about what is to come. We talked about eschatology. But there's always things. I mean, the computer, nothing new. Yes, the computer does change in certain ways, but nothing new. The environment may change and one gadget may replace another gadget. We've been in history from 8-tracks to cassette tapes to CDs to MP3 players. And But there is nothing really new under the sun when you think about all these things. People stay the same. What is making us all stay the same? Well, we're born with a sin nature. And what does that say about people is that people steal, lie, kill, and makes war. And those things will be until the end of time. But anything that is truly new, comes from above the sun. A new song, Psalm 40, that's something new, a new song. A new birth in Jesus. The new man, the new person in Christ Jesus. Paul writes about 2 Corinthians 5:17, the new creature, we become a new creature through Christ Jesus. Revelation 21, the new heaven and new earth, that's new. A new commandment, John 13:34, and a new name, Revelation 2:17. So there are things that are new, even though there are things that are under the sun that are not new. Nothing changes. But then he goes here and he talks about memory, verse number 11. In this verse he says again, there is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. Here today, gone tomorrow. We keep on forgetting. You know, oftentimes if I were to ask to the average church member, and I'm not putting you on the spot here tonight, but what I preach about 3 months ago on Sunday morning, so-and-so, I mean, probably not many would be able to remember unless you made notes, and that's okay because we are forgetful people. We forget. I heard once of a seminary professor that said that when he would preach, he would write down notes and he would record himself because he said, if I ever preach the same sermon, hopefully somebody had taken good notes and I preached the same thing over again. So he would listen to himself when he would go back to preach a sermon just to make for certain it wasn't the same thing. But no memory, here today, gone tomorrow. And this is important here as he's talking about nothing new under the sun. But what is Solomon saying in all of this that we've been talking about? Is that you want to know what life is all about without God? Well, listen to me. I've been there. Listen to me. I know. Listen to me. I've been down this road before. I've heard many times where young men will go into these facilities where there are young teenagers that have struggled with disobedience. And they've walked that path and they've been through those circumstances and they've made those mistakes that those teenagers are on the brink of making, those young men. And they'll go in and they'll share and they'll say, listen, I've been down the road that you don't want to go down. And they'll go in and they'll talk to them about it. And they'll literally just get to where the rubber meets the road saying, you don't want to do this. You're heading down a path to destruction and you don't want to do it. And hopefully through that testimony of hearing from someone that's been through it, that young teenager's life will be altered and changed. We pray that it is. And that individual may be able to reach them in a way that I couldn't because I've not been down that road, but they have. And they could talk to them and let them know that it's not what they want to do. And see, Solomon's saying here, this isn't a path that you want to go down. You don't want to search for all these things to find in this world to bring you happiness because they will leave you wanting more. They will leave you empty. That's what Solomon's saying. I've been there. And he says here his initial findings, life without God amounts to sore travail. Look what he says here in verse number 13. And I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail, that's an important word there, hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. Now, what is travail? It means to labor in pain. So this is what Solomon has experienced. He's experienced pain of trying to find wisdom, and he's finally find joy as he gave his heart. What does that mean to give his heart completely over to? Is that it wasn't something that he just half did. He put his whole heart into it, trying to find these things. But also, he says here in verse number 14, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun. He didn't say I've seen some. He says I've seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Vanity, he says, I've seen it all. And you know what it's left me? Empty. Empty. There's just emptiness that's there. And that's his description. But also he says vexation of spirit. And what does vexation of spirit mean? Trouble and worry. It's left him troubled. It's left him worried. He thought that it would bring him joy, but the only thing it's brought him is trouble. Also here in verse number 15, he says, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. He says this doesn't do any good to straighten out things. We live in a crooked world. We live in a broken world. Yes. You can't fix someone that... Yes. We can't fix that which is totally against what God's Word says. We all know the Catholic Church is a mess. We all know the Methodist Church is a mess. The world in general. The only thing that can straighten anybody out is the precious blood of the Lamb that can change lives. That's the only thing. Also here, we see verse number 15 again, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. There is no counting what is lacking in life. The needs of life are endless. We can try our best to meet needs, but there's always going to be more needs to be met. You're only one person, and you can only do so much. Also, the more you're acquainted with this world, the more depressed you will come. This is what he's talking about in verse number 18. For in much wisdom is much grief. What's he saying? Being more aware just brings you more grief. That's what I've talked about often about with the news. When you get on, you flip on, you look at the news, especially when there's something very controversial that's on TV, what will it do? It'll make you just want to take the remote and just toss it at the TV and say, forget about it. They're crazy, especially whatever station you land on, and oftentimes it's all of them. Some are better than others, but most of them are pretty much pointless to listen to. But the more you are acquainted with this world, the more depressed you will become, because seeing how bad things really, really are. And Solomon's saying, if you want to save yourself a lot of heartache, just listen to me. He's writing this. He says, listen to me. He says, in fact, if you'd be pretty much a fool not to pay attention to what I'm saying. He went farther in the world than anyone. If anyone can tell what life is apart from God, it would be this man, Solomon. And when he wrote this wasn't something that was written recently. This has been written a long time ago. And for the readers to read this and to know the wisdom of Solomon, and to know that this man that was so wise, he went out. He tried with the women. He tried with the money. He tried with the wealth. But it's still just what brought him vanity and vexation of spirit. And he says, listen. If I've tried it and I could not find happiness and joy. Don't make the same mistake. And I think that is an excellent lesson for us as well, to find out that apart from the Lord, there is no happiness and joy. Because with the Lord, that's the only true joy that we can have, is through the Lord. And people will try. They'll try to find joy. And I can almost guarantee you that most people that are famous, they got the millions, they've got the mansions, they've got it all. And they may look like they're joyful, but they're wanting more. They're wanting more. And Paul talks about being content. It's like that illustration I shared once, and I'll share it again. I think I've shared this a couple times, about the man who walks in with the TVs, and he sees all these TVs. And his wife says, you get one. But he walked in and he says, I want them all, and I want them now. All the TVs were right there before him, right there to see. And see, he walked in wanting one, but he couldn't just have one. He saw them all. He didn't know what he wanted, so he just wanted all of them. And that's the type of thing that we see with under the sun, is just there is no fulfillment. But to be totally fulfilled only comes through Jesus. Because He is sufficient and He is enough. If Jesus isn't enough, then He was a liar. He is enough for you and He's enough for me. And I think this is an excellent lesson here to learn about Solomon's journey and how he discovered everything under the sun, how it wasn't joyful in his pursuit of that. Because he pursued it, all right. He pursued it and found that out to be the case. All right, questions? Anybody have a thought? It's very possible I read on that, and I think that it was a struggle for him because he was searching the questions of life. And going through these things, obviously he was wise, but he had his flaws. And so I think that that's the case. I think that when it happened, I don't know where it all clicked with him for finding out that this just isn't it. But I think at the end of his life, when he reflected, he wanted people to know, I searched it all. There was no mat left not checked under. I mean, there was no room that I didn't go in and look to see what was there. He said, I have went and I have searched, and there is nothing new under the sun. So I think that's what we find. And I can almost imagine that this would have been something that would have been later in his life where he recounts this and writes that. One of my favorite stories of Solomon, and I can't recall the passage off the top of my head right now, maybe someone else can. It's where the two moms come in and they were debating and fighting over the child. And Solomon in his wisdom wanted to say, well, we'll just split the baby. And the one mom was okay with it, or said, and the other one said, no, just give her the baby. And he said, you have spoken. And he found out who the true mother was, because she didn't want the baby. Anybody know that passage? I can't recall it off the top of my head right now, but that's one of my. I've always remembered that's one of my favorites of his, because that excellency in how he chose and used his wisdom to demonstrate that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
everything was just there, you're like, I'm so bored, Uh, it just, I guess there's some sympathy being poor. I don't know, but
I think we all have a desire to feel needed,
Mm-hmm.
and when we're not needed, then we feel depressed.
Found these people that are so all over this and look for answers, and they don't realize how simple salvation is. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to bring that to them. For a simple-minded person, it's so easy to just say, here, God just wants, He gave His life for you, and life for you.
Yeah.
Feel that.
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much love around you. You don't have to, search and all this. You just, if you enjoy people around you and your family and stuff like that, that's a lot. You know, you can't do that good.
I think about how today advertisers are pounding in people's heads with media about you need this,
You need
you
this.
need this, you gotta have this.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of our problem too in society is everybody thinks, I need that. They tell me I need it, I need it.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Just because they tell you to. Or you
Yeah. I got to have the best of the best. Yeah. And if I don't have the best of the best, I'm unfulfilled.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that goes with what Solomon was saying. There's nothing new under the sun. Satan and his tricks and his whatever. I mean, it's the same thing he was doing 4,000 years ago. The same tricks work on us today.
Mm-hmm.
It's so simple.
Mm-hmm.
He's so cunning, but
Even though God gave him wisdom, he didn't use it in the wisest ways.
He wasn't very smart.
No.
It's too bad it was near the end of his life when he recognized that, I think.
Yeah, I think, Sandra, what you're talking about with people looking for answers, I've met many people that just won't accept God's word as it is written, even though we know that even historical books outside the Bible even solidify the Bible. I mean, the book of Josephus that he wrote, he's a Jewish historian. It even credits the Bible and gives references to Jesus, and there's several other instances as well. And you have a lot of people that are looking for answers, the meaning of life. There has to be more, something that's there. And searching outside of this, I mean, you're going to be searching always. There's never going to be an end. There's never going to be, it's just always going to be a constant searching. But for this, I mean, this tells me what the meaning of life is. Exactly what the meaning of life is. And so Solomon knew he had searched. He had searched, but he couldn't find it. And that's what he means under the sun. Yeah, 1 Kings 3. I couldn't remember the verse. And the king said, divide the living child in two and give half to the other and half to the other. Or half to the one, half to the other. Then said the king, the one saith, this is my son that liveth, and thy son is dead. And the other saith, nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. Then the king answered and said, give her the living child, and in no way slay it. She is the mother thereof. So that shows wisdom there. Anyone else with a thought? hopefully this will be an interesting study. I like to do books that we often don't visit a lot. So
In case anybody's interested in that first name that you listed on the.
Koheleth.
Derek Williams.
Okay, yeah.
He was a member at Cedar Grove when we went there, and
Yeah.
everybody that goes here from Cedar Grove will know who he is. They were a great Christian family and craziest two that I've ever met in my life, but they have a lot of fun living life. And his wife is a homeschool coordinator in the area. So they're well known. And he's in his 50s, I'd say, early 50s, maybe late 40s.
Hmm.
And he was just diagnosed on December the 20th.
Wow.
And I think it's already in his lymph nodes and possibly in his pancreas.
Hmm.
We're
Okay.
waiting the results of a body scan for that to come back.
Okay.
He really needs our prayers.
Yeah. Did you say that was the one? Oh, there. Yeah, the one at the top. I'm sorry, I was confused. You said first name. I thought we were still on the study. That's why I went Koheleth. I was like, oh, well, that's the name of the preacher. I thought that's what I thought you was mentioning. So sorry. We'll pray for Koheleth. But yeah, we'll for sure. Thank you for telling more about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Might be unknown to some of the people.
Okay. Okay. All right, anything else before we finish? Thank y'all for coming tonight. And, hopefully you'll enjoy this. And I got a new sermon series I'm going to start Sunday too, and it's going to be for several Sunday mornings. We're going to go through it, but I'll keep you on the edge of your seat about that when I will tell you what it is. So that way you'll show up. Because if I tell you what it is, you may not like it and not show up. So, all right. Hey, let's stand together tonight and we'll pray. Father, thank you for tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you for the time that we can reflect and we can dive deeper into your word and look at passages and look at the meaning, look at what was happening during that time period. And Father, also I thank you for the questions tonight. Thank you for everyone that came and showed up. And we just pray this will be a great study as we continue to go through the book of Ecclesiastes. And also pray for safety as we travel home tonight. Look forward to Sunday being the first Sunday of the new 2024 year. We love you, we praise you, and we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.